Good morning, everybody. Shefa Brucha v'Atzlucha. We are now in parashat Chukat. Zot Chukat Torah. That's the law of the Torah. What is the law of the Torah? And then the Torah speaks with us about Para Aduma, the red cow. And the question is, why is the law of the Torah Para Aduma? So we all know what Shlomo HaMelech said. Shlomo HaMelech said, Echkema vehi rechoka mimeni. When he got to the mitzvah of Para Aduma, he said, I'm very clever, I've got a lot of wisdom. He got it from God, and with all the wisdom he's got, this is too much for him. He cannot understand what it's all about, this Para Aduma. And there are a few very interesting questions about it. And only this year I realized that it's more complicated than I thought. First of all, why is Para Aduma the symbol of all the laws of the Torah? Because nobody understands the mitzvah. But that's not exactly right, because if we look at Rashi, and I'm in the middle of driving, so I cannot look into Rashi, but you can all look into Rashi of our parasha, and you will see through the parasha of how do you do the Para Aduma, how you act with it, you will find a very interesting point, that there are a lot of reasons that Rashi gives for Para Aduma. And he says that Para Aduma is really it's against the sin of the golden calf that we did. So the golden calf against the Para Aduma, the red cow, and he brings all the details and why do you do this with the Para Aduma, why do you do that, and why the Kohen is doing it, and all those are, and I must say it's a very long explanation that really, if somebody reads it, what did Shlomo HaMelech say? What do you mean? It's very clear what is Para Aduma and why and what's the reason. But there is one problem, because Para Aduma was given to us in Mara, which is much, much before the golden calf sin. So it cannot be that before we sinned, Kadosh Baruch Hu already gave us the sacrifice to bring for the sin. So okay, we can say in the Torah there is no, it's not a chronological system, and sometimes things can be put in the Torah before the other things happen. But as the Rambam says, it's impossible that God will write in the Torah a sacrifice for something that didn't happen yet. This is against all the logic of the Torah. So, and because of this explanation of Rashi is not exactly acceptable. 1 minute. What do you mean? Rashi didn't know what I'm saying now? Of course he knew. So why is he giving all this explanation? And why Shlomo HaMelech is saying there is no explanation? And really, if you look at it, you see things are really, really complicated with this Para Aduma. And maybe what we are really looking into is this whole thing that, first of all, Shlomo HaMelech is telling us something very important. There are things in Para Aduma that we really are very hard to understand, though Rashi is giving explanations. And what are those things? For example, and this is, let's say, the main thing, it's purifying the impure and impuring the pure, or in Hebrew maybe it sounds better, מתאר את הטמאים ומטמא את הטהורים. So if you pure and you touch the ephah of Para Aduma, you are getting the tuma and you are tame now. And if you tame and you get the ephah of Para Aduma, you are pure, you are tahor. This is something not reasonable. It's like you've got this drink, vitamin drink, that is doing very good to your body. And if you drink it, if you've got certain illness and you drink it, you're getting much better. From the other side, if somebody's got no illness, is going to get ill. So somebody says, okay, it's like in medicine, but we're not talking about medicine. I'm talking about the logic behind the idea that something is good for you. And if it's good for you, for example, I sell orthopedic chairs. So an orthopedic chair is built in a way, ergonomically, to support the body of the one who is sitting, and you can adjust it to the body. Now, impossible that the chair that is good and makes, and let's say is good from the ergonomical point of view, will cure somebody with backaches and will give backaches to somebody who has got no backaches. And we can go so on and so on and so on. So one of the interesting points is, how is it that the same thing is purifying the tameim and metame et hateorim? One interesting explanation I saw, which is also very interesting to know, is that what does it mean? It means, you have those people, they think they are pure, they are tzaddikim, and they're really doing all the good in the eyes of God. It says if somebody thinks like this, he is tameh. Impossible. En tzaddik ba'aretz she'aseh tov ve'lo yachta. Everybody's got sins. And as it doesn't matter who you are. We see it in the last parasha with Korach. He was one of those who was carrying the Aron HaKodesh. He had the Holy Spirit. He was rich. He had everything in life. And before this, we have the Meraglim. And there also the same story. The Meraglim, they were the biggest people, the highest level people in the nation. Also with Korach, you have those 250 people that were Rashei Sanedraot. And they did the mistake. And they did the wrongs in the eyes of God. In other words, you cannot say, I am pure, I am a tzaddik 100%, impossible. So what the Torah is telling us in this thing, that if you think you are 100% pure, you are tameh. But if you realize that you are tameh, then the parah adumah is purifying you. In other words, if you know that you are wrong, you can fix it. You can do the good in the eyes of God. But if you think you are 100% right, so you're not going to fix it. You're going to stay in the sin. It's like when somebody wants to learn. We're talking about Shlomo HaMelech HaChacham Mikol Adam, and he says, "Mikol melamdai iskal." He says, "I can learn from everybody. From everybody, you have to learn." And mitalmidai yoter mikol. And for my students, I don't know if Shlomo HaMelech said it. And mitalmidai yoter mikol. And for my students, more than from the others. And we know in life that we always learn a new thing. Always there is something new to learn. And if somebody thinks he knows it all, you cannot teach him anything. And this is the same thing when we look at let's say, if I want to teach somebody something, he says, "Oh, I know." So if you have a student that knows everything, there's nothing you can teach him. From the other side, if you know that you don't know it all, you can always learn. So in other words, an interesting point of the parah adumah, the efer, that's purified and impurified and etc. But still we have the question, what is Shlomo HaMelech saying that he doesn't understand what it's all about? And Rashi is explaining all this explanation. So maybe we're talking only about this point of purifying and impurifying. But anyway, the idea is very clear. The general idea is very clear. This is a very complicated issue, this whole thing of parah adumah. And as we say, Shivim Panim LaTorah, we can take all those things together and put them together and come to the conclusion that really the idea is that it doesn't matter if you understand or you don't understand. You make the mitzvahs. You do them because God told you to do it. And this is the reason you do it. And here you have to understand. Though God is telling you to do something you don't understand, doesn't mean that there is no reason. There is certainly a reason. Because God is not going to tell you to do anything without a good reason to do the good. In other words, we do not understand the deepness of the mitzvahs. And that's what Shlomo HaMelech is saying. If you think that you know the reason, you don't. Because maybe you know something on the surface, but it's so much to learn, so much to go in. And this is what I'm finding out now. With all my wisdom, says Shlomo HaMelech, I realize that all the reason and all the explanation on you, there are nothing. There's so much more to learn, so much more inside everything. And that's the big lesson for us. Because the mistake of Korach v'Adato, the mistake of the Meraglim, the mistake of those people that were standing against Aaron to want his job, the mistake was that they thought that they know better. You know, the generation of the desert is called Dor De'ah. Dor De'ah means that they had the Holy Spirit. They were connected to God in the best way there is. And we see that they have those sins all the time. In other words, it doesn't matter how clever you are, and if you're a great tzaddik or not, you must check if your connection is a right connection. It's like a few years ago I bought this lamp in Ace, I think, or whatever, and it's very interesting. When we came home, and you see, wow, they boxed so many parts, unbelievable. Eventually, I assembled the lamp, put it into the socket, and boom, I had a shortcut in the whole house. Later on, I realized that I put the wires in the wrong way. In other words, if your wires are in the wrong way, if you are connected to the source in the wrong way, you go in the wrong way. And you can even explode, as Korach and Adato happened last week. And this is what the Torah is telling us. It's not enough that you think you know it all. Even if you know it all, you have to understand and realize that you really know nothing. What you know is a small thing. And if God tells you to do something, you do what God tells you to do, and you don't go in any other way. That's the only way. Because even if you think you know, as we see, a lot of times in life, you think you know, but then you realize you didn't know. And this is the big lesson from Paraduma. So how do we do those things? How can we go in the right way and not fall to a different way? So the Torah is telling us a very interesting story about Sichon Melech HaEmori, that he conquered Heshbon. Heshbon was belonging to Moab, and he went on war with them, and he won, and he took Heshbon from them. And then what happened? Am Yisrael came, wanted to go past the land of the Sichon Melech HaEmori, the Amorite king, Sichon, and he didn't let them, and he went out to go for and fight with them. And what happened eventually, that Am Yisrael went on a fight with him, on a war, and they won the war, and they took all the cities, including Heshbon. And then the Torah is telling us that Heshbon was a town that was really belonging to Moab. Why is the Torah telling us this? So Rashi explains to us that we had this order from God: you don't touch Moab. You cannot go and start any war with them. And if Heshbon would have been belonged still to Moab, we couldn't conquer it. We couldn't go on war with it, with the Moab. But when Sichon, the king of the Amorite, he took Heshbon from Moab, now we could take it from him because it's not Moab anymore. Now, if Sichon knew this calculation, if he knew the truth behind his big victory, and they say Heshbon was a very strong city, very hard to conquer, and if he knew that what he really won is not, he didn't win anything, on the contrary, he lost, would he go on war with Heshbon? Would he take it, or would he do all those big parade on his big victory on Heshbon? Definitely not. But he didn't do the right calculation. He didn't know the right calculation. Then the Torah is telling us, Al ken yomru moshlim bo Heshbon. So then we'll say the governors come to Heshbon. Now Heshbon, as we all know in Hebrew, Heshbon is also calculation. And what the Torah is telling us, moshlim, the governor, those who govern their Yetzer Hara, those who control Yetzer Hara, they are on top of it, they can do the right calculation. Because if Yetzer Hara is involved, if the bad inclination is involved, if your lust is involved, if your desire, if this is all the bad things are involved, what you're going to do, it's going to influence you to see things in the wrong way. The same way as I connected the lamp with the wrong connection. This is going to happen if you don't do the right calculation, if you haven't got the right connection. And how do you have the right connection? How do you do the right calculation? The only way is if you control Yetzer Hara. If you don't control Yetzer Hara, you cannot do the right calculation. And this is what the Torah is telling us. Al ken yomru moshlim. When you want to make the right calculation, you have to control Yetzer Hara. And to control Yetzer Hara, we all know it's not very easy. Sometimes it is very difficult. But if we succeed to control Yetzer Hara, it's like In Europe, you have those places that you're not allowed to go with a car in, so you go with a carriage with horses. And there are people like this tourists, they come there and they go on these carriages. And this tourist, he came to this one of those towns, and he's going on the carriage with the guy, and the guy just had lunch. And of course, after lunch, he had 5-6 beers, and he was half asleep, half shiur. And he's going, and the guy is telling him, the tourist is sitting, all the family, be careful, yes, look where you're going. Don't worry, the horse knows the way. Anyway, this guy, he suddenly goes to sleep in the middle. The horse goes, everything is okay. Suddenly the horse sees something to eat, some weed on the side of the road. And what does he do? He's also angry. He also wants to eat. So he goes to the side of the road, and the whole carriage collapses and goes down, and everybody falls out, and they get injured. So the guy comes to this guy and says, stupid. Why? I told you to look after your horse. He says, oh, my horse is very clever. He knows the way. He goes all the time the same way. He knows the way. He's very clever. He says, your horse is clever? It's a horse. It goes after desire. And that's exactly what the Chafetz Chaim is telling us in this mashal. This is a Chafetz Chaim mashal. It says, when you think that you can leave the leash out of your beastly soul, then the beastly soul will lead you to disaster. You need to control. You need to hold the leash. You need to show the way and control the horse, which is your beastly soul. Then when you do this, then you can go and get to the right destination. To control the Yetzer Hara is the secret. It's not easy. It's sometimes very difficult. For example, I'm in the middle of writing Dvar Torah for Shabbos, and yesterday we were sitting in a shul, the synagogue in Petach Tikva, and I must tell you, what I saw there was unbelievable. Was this guy, this rabbi, giving a drasha, and I think I didn't hear anything, but there were two people behind the bima speaking. I didn't hear them. So he approached them behind the bima and shouted to them, stop talking, here is a shiur now, and you need to say. And you know what he was talking about? He was talking about not getting angry, not getting into machloket, and then they must talk again or something, and he went there and the shouting, and maybe he raised it with his hand. And this guy is talking very softly about machloket, about behaving nicely, about not getting angry. And he was so angry and so, really, he shamed those people. And by the way, this was one guy, this was a father and a son. The father was around 90 and he was crippled. He came with a wheelchair into the shul. And maybe he doesn't hear so good, so maybe he talked and said something, I don't know what. And the son got up and he started shouting at us, I'm going to hit you. I was there with my son, I couldn't believe it. This guy is talking about machloket, about behaving nicely, about not getting angry, and he is shaming those two people, and he's getting to a row that in a minute it will be I thought there was going to be a physical fight there. Anyway, my son and I decided we're not going, this was before Mincha and Mariv, we're not going to daven Mariv in this place. We went to a different shul. And this is exactly the point. If you want to do the right calculation, if you want to be in the right way, you have to control your Yetzer Hara. You have to know how to control the bad inclination. This is one of the crucial points. How can somebody stand and talk about being nice, not getting into arguments, and same time shouting like a Michiganer on an old guy and his son, and getting involved in this? The lesson from our parasha is, I think, what we should learn is, first of all, we do whatever God tells us to do. We try to understand, because it's our obligation to understand, to learn, and to know more. As Shlomo HaMelech said, Echkema, you learn and you see. But you have to understand that even if you understand, you really don't understand the whole thing. And even if you don't understand anything, you still do it because God Whatever he tells us to do is only for our good. And whatever he tells us to do, who says that we understand it? And in order to make this point a little clearer, is that there was this guy, a poor guy. He didn't know how to read and write, and he was a beggar. Suddenly he won the lottery. He became a millionaire. And he had a daughter, and he wanted to get her married, so he took the best shadchanim, and he guys told them, if you find me a good shidduch, you're going to be paid well. And one of the shadchanim, he knew how to talk, and he convinced the rabbi to marry his son to the daughter of this peasant. Anyway, they got married, and the peasant didn't understand why there is no connection between the families. How is it that he never invites him and ever? So one day he's asking him, I want to understand, we are related now. My daughter is married to your son. Why don't you invite me? Or the rabbi told him, I want to ask you something. Do you really think that I have something to do with you? That you will even have a conversation with me? You are, with all due respect, a peasant. You don't know to write. You don't know to read. I am a respected rabbi. I know a lot. And my level is so above you. How do you think we can even think? I can even think about connection with you that knows nothing and can talk only about, sorry to tell you, stupid things. Now, this is a mashal. The thing is, like God is telling us, you want to know the Torah? You want to know the secrets of the Torah? Who do you think you are? Do you think that you know that you can even think about getting close to knowing the Torah? The Torah from heaven that God gave us? How do we even try and to think like this? And to think that we can understand what God gave us? God is up there, is nothing connected to us with the level of God to us. But God wants only the best for us. So God gave us the Torah. God gave us the laws. But to think that we can understand everything? This is like this peasant who think he could talk with the rabbi, to have a real conversation. Of course there are similarity and they're also not, but it's a mashal. And the idea is very simple. As we said, we do the mitzvahs because God told us to do. And we have to understand, whatever God tells us to do is only for the best of us. So even if you don't understand, we still do it. And even if you understand, you have to understand that you don't really understand everything. So if you come to conclusion that are against the laws of the Torah, because you think you know why, you know how, think about Korach, think about the Meraglim, think about Para Aduma, think about what Shlomo HaMelech said, and think about, do I really do those things without any desire to something, without any, a will to do something that I want for me? Is not Yetzer Hara involved? The bad inclination maybe is involved. So remember, Al Ken Yomu HaMoshlim, you have to do the right calculation. And the right calculation you can do only when you take yourself out of all things that make you think to do something that is not for the benefit of God. You have to take out the Yetzer Hara, the beastly soul, and let your neshama control. And if your neshama is in control on the beastly soul, then you can do the right calculation. I hope that the shiur was okay. I would like to hear your comments because I did it like without books, without anything on the way. And sometimes you have a certain idea and then it changed during the talk. So I hope it was okay. All the best to everybody and have a nice week.